you the maid, so you bad. I'm a savage, yeah. Classy, bougie, ratchet, yeah. Sassy, moody, nasty, yeah. Acting stupid, what's happening? Bitch, what was happening? Bitch, I'm a savage, yeah.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Murder Meals. It's your girl Ayanna, and I am so excited to be here with you all. So for this month, well, what's left of this month, because I know your girl hadn't been here for the past 2 weeks. In celebration of Pride Month, I'm going to kind of be focusing on stories that affect the LGBTQ plus community. Please excuse me if I didn't use the right acronyms, or I am trying. Now, before we get started, definitely if you haven't already done so, make sure you go ahead and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any uploads from me. And I definitely hope that you all like today's video. So for today's video, in light of Father's Day and the NBA Finals, I decided to make a video giving ideas on game day foods. So I'm going to be doing a 3-course sampler platter that is going to feature potato skins, Southwest egg rolls, and spinach dip. So I definitely hope you all enjoy this video, and let's get going. So we're gonna first start off with our potato skins, and before you ask, your girl did wash them and scrub them suckers down, because one thing I can't stand is no grimy potatoes. Ugh, it sets my spirit off. Today's case is going to be about the unfortunate murder of Brittany Cosby and Crystal Jackson of Galveston, Texas. Well, Galveston and Houston, I never really realized that they were that close, but. So March 7, 2014 was just like an ordinary Friday morning, you know, when you wake up and you say, ooh, it's the weekend, we finally here, let's get the going, get this day over so I can, you know, get to my plans, you know how it be, except for me because I work on Saturday, but you know, let's not talk about that. At about 7:30 a.m., local delivery truck driver was dropping off a load of beer at a local store when he noticed what looks to be a pair of 2 mannequins. He went a little bit closer to take a look at the mannequins, wondering why they're just out here, you know, behind some dumpsters, when he realized that they weren't mannequins, they're in fact 2 deceased women's bodies. He immediately called local authorities and police rushed down to the scene. When police arrived, they discovered what can only be described as a gruesome killing. One of the victims was laying on her back with a bullet hole on the top right of her head and the exit wound being behind her left ear. The other victim was laying on her stomach with a sheet wrapped around her head. It had been apparent that she had been beaten very terribly. It was determined just by looking at her that her neck had been broken by just a single blow to her head, and she had also been struck another 4 times as well. Her skull had been cracked open by the pure viciousness of her attack. Police were at a loss of words as to what they were looking at. But one thing that they could tell, just based off of the clear overkill of the murder, was that this was a crime of passion. So instantly they knew that the killer had to have been someone that the girls knew and that they were close to. Now, while at the crime scene, police came across what looked to be a big white window shutter that had blood splatter going across the window shutter. Also attached to the window shutter on top looked to be like a piece of paper, almost as if someone had used the paper as like a handle or a mitt almost to hold the window shutter, so it was kind of stuck in place on the window shutter. Detectives had also noticed burn marks, i.e., the little skid marks on the road. This basically indicating that whoever it was that dropped their bodies off wanted to get out there ASAP Rocky, which it's obvious you just dropped off 2 dead bodies. Anybody with the mind is going to try to get up out of there as quickly as possible. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put these in the oven. Put these in the oven. So at this point, police didn't know who the victims were, and they were needing to find out who they were so they can start the investigation. But with no form of IDs or wallets on the victim, the police didn't know where to start. That was until police came across an envelope laying in the crime scene. And whenever they looked at the envelope, they noticed that it had the name Brittany Cosby. They also noticed that one of the girls had a tattoo on her that said Brittany. So they assumed that one of the victims' name was in fact Brittany. Great police work. So upon looking over the envelope, they did notice that there was an address for Miss Cosby. So police immediately went over to the address to speak with the hopeful family. When they got to the home, police and detectives were greeted by Annie Lee Cosby, which was Brittany's great-grandmother. Their police did confirm with Miss Cosby that the woman in question was in fact 24-year-old Brittany, and she had been missing for a couple of days. At the time that they were speaking to Miss Annie, a gentleman walked in who was later identified as James Cosby, Brittany's father. Now that they had identified one of the victims, they got some information about Brittany from her father and her great-grandmother. Brittany Cosby was born July 20th, 1990, making her 24 years old. Her parents had separated when she was just 4 years old. They had a very tumultuous relationship, and her dad would be in and out of jail her whole life. There wasn't much about Brittany's mother and what the situation was with her mother. However, Brittany was raised by her great-grandmother and lived with her great-grandmother most of her life. Brittany's great-grandmother really took it hard when she learned of her granddaughter's murder. Her granddaughter was one of her caregivers. She actually had taken a few nursing classes just so she could make sure she could take care of her grandmother the best that she knew how. So again, at this time, while they were talking to Brittany's great-grandmother, her dad walks in. And whenever they broke the news to him, he was visibly shooken up. He was just trying to figure out who did this to his daughter, what happened, and he was just inconsolable at the time. Once he was able to calm down and sit down, he did confirm who the other victim was. He stated that the other victim was Crystal Jackson, Brittany Cosby's girlfriend of 2 years. Crystal Jackson was a 24-year-old single mother of a 5-year-old little girl named Zanaya. The two had actually met on public transportation. Crystal worked as a security officer and Brittany worked as a barista at a local Starbucks. And on their way to work or coming home from work, something to do with them trying to earn them coins, they had met each other on public transit and they instantly hit it off, and the two had been inseparable ever since. So the two had been dating for the past 2 years and they were really trying to better their life. They wanted to eventually get their own apartment or home for themselves, but until then, they were building up to that life as most young people have to. They wanted to raise their daughter together as a family and just live the life that they've always imagined. The three of them lived with Brittany's great-grandmother A few days prior to the girl's murder, they had actually bought a new vehicle with the help of Brittany's great-grandmother co-signing. James informed police that the last time that he saw the girls, it was about 2 days ago, and the days started out just as any other day would. The girls were getting ready for work, and they were getting little Zanaya ready for school and getting her dressed. All of a sudden, Brittany and Crystal had left the home and left Zanaya at home. So James didn't think much about it. He stated that he just simply thought they were running to the corner store and that they would be back. However, they never returned and they never came back for Zanaya. So at this point, now that they have identified the second victim, police head over to Crystal Jackson's parents' home in order to speak with them and just to make a positive ID and get their side of the situation as far as what was going on. When talking to Crystal's dad, he made it no secret that he was no fan of Brittany or Brittany and Crystal or just homosexuality in general. Crystal was raised by her two parents, Pastor Ivan Jackson and Miss Mary Jackson, and he was a very strict pastor, you know, fire in hell, you know, homosexuality is a sin and all that jazz. So he didn't agree with that lifestyle at all, and he did not care for Brittany at all, and he made it no secret. Now, their parents did state that they knew that Brittany was missing, and they also hadn't seen her in a few days. Now, due to her homosexuality and her whole relationship with Brittany, Crystal and her parents' relationships was strained, more on the dad's end, but she did still split time between her parents' house and the home she had with Brittany in order to raise her daughter and to spend time with her parents. Now, Ivan said that he always felt like the relationship with Brittany was going to be his daughter's downfall, and he actually told her this a few times that, you know, Brittany was going to be the reason that she got killed. It was going to be the cause of her death. And whenever she was missing, he actually had a plan to go down to Brittany's home with his gun and confront her and ask what happened to his daughter, because I guess at this time he felt like Brittany was somehow involved with the disappearance of his daughter, and he wanted to get to the bottom of it. Now, thankfully, Miss Mary, his wife, was able to talk him out of this, and he did not go down there. But due to the obvious disdain and turmoil relationship between the two, Ivan quickly became a suspect in the murder of his daughter. So with this in mind, police did go ahead and collect Ivan's gun so they can compare it to the gunshot wound. Again, due to the type of crime that it was, police did know that they were looking for someone who had some type of relationship or was close to either one or both of the girls. So they started to ask questions about Zanaya's father. Crystal's mother informed police that after Crystal got pregnant, the relationship with Zanaya's father basically went downhill. He didn't really want nor have anything to do with the baby or anything involved in raising Zanaya. So with that in mind, police knew that they needed to go ahead and look in other spots. Now, they did still end up bringing him in for questioning, obviously, because it's like, not only you're not taking care of your daughter, so no happy Father's Day to you, but you know, we gotta see, are you good for this? However, with the way that, with the location of the bodies and where the girls were found, they knew that there was only one way that you can get from Houston to Galveston, and again, I didn't realize it was this close, and they knew that it was from the ferry boat. So police went ahead and tracked down the CCTV footage of the port where I'm about to call it a trolley. What is it called? Police was able to get a hold of the CCTV footage from the ferry. And after some hours of searching, they finally hit a little gold. They found footage of Brittany and Crystal's new 2006 Kia Sorento, and it was at the port of the docking station for the ferry, and the security on the ferry had stopped the vehicle. They had stopped the vehicle, and whenever they stopped the vehicle, you see someone exiting the car. Once exiting the car, you see that it was a man. So that was a big indication to police that they could just assume that at this point, the girls were already dead. And based off of the footage that they were able to see, the man looked to be very tall and slender. So they decided to go ahead and track down the security guard that night so they can go ahead and they decided to go ahead and track down security from that night so they can go ahead and get more of a description of the person who was driving this vehicle. When they talked to the security officer, he stated that he did remember the person, and the reason why he had stopped the person was because one of the headlights was out. He remembers thinking that the driver was acting very odd. They were very jumpy and agitated, and when they got out of the car, there was really no need to do all of that. He just felt like there was something strange going on with him, but he just couldn't figure out what it was. The security officer described the driver as being a man in his late 20s, early 30s. He was able to go down to the police station and give a composite sketch that police were able to work off of. Now, based off of the description of the driver, no one in Brittany and Crystal's life matched that description except for Zania's father. Ivan, Crystal's father, had been ruled out as a suspect due to the bullets did not match the gun that he had. So he was ruled out, and he also didn't fit the composite sketch or the demographics of the driver. Now again, police did know that this was going to be a very hard case to crack. However, things did start to fall into place and line up. They had received a call from a man who had found a wallet with an ID in it, and that wallet had belonged to Brittany. Now, in order to get a better timeline of events and to fill in some of the gaps of the situation of what was happening, detectives had went back over to the family home of Brittany so they can ask her father some follow-up questions. However, at the time, he was not there, but they did run into Annie's caregiver, and she stepped outside and she was kind of just talking to detectives. In passing, she was just basically kind of saying how she had never seen the little garage breezeway, how she'd never seen the garage breezeway look so clean and cleared out, and how she's worked there for years, and she's even had her kids and grandkids come by to clear out the breezeway, but it's never been this clean and spotless. Now that was kind of like, why is it all of a sudden so clean? You know, that was kind of like a little light bulb moment for the police. So they started looking around, and the detective noticed it was a set of like 5 bricks that were just out of place. It just, what they say, what here does not belong, it was the bricks. So once he moved the bricks, he saw what looked to be a few blood splatter. Now, just alone, an isolated incident of just some blood splatter wouldn't be so suspicious if it weren't for the fact that one of the women of the home had previously been murdered, and they were still trying to figure out where did the murder actually take place, because where they found the bodies, police knew just by looking at the scene that this had only been the drop-off location to dump the bodies. This wasn't the primary location for where the actual crime was committed. They were still actually looking for that location. So detective, he started looking around a little bit more, and then he noticed that there was a few blood stains on the door and on the fence. So with that being found, police immediately turned their suspicions to Brittany's father, James Cosby. So police immediately obtained a search warrant and started searching the home. One of the first things that police noticed whenever they started looking closer at the home was that their home had the same type of white window shutters that was found at the crime scene. And not only did they have the same type, the home was missing a window shutter as well. Now, when looking inside the actual residence, at first glance, everything looked normal, everything looked okay. But baby, when police lit that thing up with lumino, it literally lit up like a Christmas tree. They stated that there was blood evidence everywhere. Now, mind you, James Cosby, Brittany's father, he slept in that area. So where they were finding all of these traces of blood, that's where her dad also was sleeping. They found different traces of blood from droplets, pools of blood, and also indications of drag marks of blood. Detectives also found a box of bullets matching the type used to kill Crystal Jackson. Now, with all of this mounting evidence and the sinking suspicion leading more and more to James, police had to look a little bit more into his past and see what type of person were they dealing with. Now, out of all the type of people they could have been dealing with, they was dealing with the wrong type. Because, oh, Jamesy boy, this was not his first run-in with the law. Back in 1994, James was actually convicted of aggravated sexual assault against a 24-year-old. Now, after he did his little bid for that, and I believe it was 10 years, but I couldn't 100% confirm, he was released, but he was rearrested and had to do another 2 years because he thought he was just gonna be out here living on the streets without registering as an offender, you know. You got to get on that list, my boy. He did not do that. So he had to go back and do his time. Now, after doing his time, he was released, and that is when he moved back into the home with, you know, Brittany and Miss Annie. Now, while police were searching the home, James and the family and some of Crystal's family as well were actually having a vigil memorial service for the girls, honoring them. And during this service, James was just doing the most. He was pleading and begging for people to come forward as witness to tell anything that they know in regards to the crime. Now, due to all the evidence that they found back at the home and what they recently found out about James, detectives, they went right down to that vigil and they picked James up. Now, at this time, they just told James that they needed to ask him further questions in order to get more information about what happened with Brittany, just, you know, to kind of figure some more things out. So he willingly went with him down to the police station. Once they got into the room and started the recording for the interview, they immediately started reading James his Miranda rights. And as soon as they started doing that, he was kind of like, hold up. Y'all normally only read Miranda rights when someone is under arrest. And he actually said something about when he watched TV shows, that's how he found out. Off of the TV shows, that's how he be knowing. Boy, please don't act like you have been in jail yourself at least a good 2 times that we know of. So at this point, police, they cut the shit and they jump to the chase, and they basically tell James what they have, and they confront him with all of the evidence. And they're just bringing evidence after evidence after evidence, just slapping in his face like bam, boom, bop. And James is still just looking like, I don't know what you're talking about. Nope, this wasn't me. I had nothing to do with it. However, they had a little piece of evidence still in their back pocket. So you remember how I told you that there was that white shutter at the actual crime scene that had the piece of paper stuck to it? Well, on that piece of paper, it was found that there was a bloody fingerprint on it. So whenever police were able to lift that fingerprint and they went to compare it, whose fingerprint do you think popped up in the system? Exactly. Police interrogated James for over 5.5 hours, and he was just making little statements here and there to where he would kind of allude that something happened, but he didn't know what or why, but he would never fully confess. Now, detectives, they were playing zero games. They weren't doing no good cop, bad cop. It was both just bad cop. They was on his ass like white on rice, and I respect them for that. So they gave him a few chances. He still didn't want to confess to the murder, so eventually they went ahead and they put him under arrest. They did arrest him for tampering with evidence. That was the only thing at this point that they would be able to hold him for. But in their mind, they knew that he had everything to do with his daughter and her girlfriend's death. They just needed to get more evidence, and they were willing to keep him out on the streets. And I know that's right, because get that boy up out of here. Now, with James under arrest, detectives were finalizing their case against him. Now, at this point, they hadn't yet found Brittany and Crystal's missing vehicle, but they were still on the lookout. About a month after his arrest, a local strip club manager called to have a car towed that had been sitting in the parking lot with no signs of movement and no one claiming the vehicle. Come to find out, this vehicle was registered to Brittany and Crystal. Inside the vehicle was more damning evidence against James. Inside the vehicle, they found bullet shell casings and blood in the car, matching the girls and James. A year after the girls' murder, James Cosby's charges were upgraded and he was charged on capital murder. Now, James, I guess he said he wasn't going down without a fight. What he was fighting, we don't know, but he wanted to go to court, so he obviously pled not guilty, as they all tend to do. His defense team basically went with the theory that someone had to been basically setting him up, stating that the vehicle was put there with the blood inside of it, and he just continued to deny that it was him. It had to be someone else. Now, I don't know if he was using a public defender or if the attorney was just doing his darndest, because clearly that made zero sense. But what the defense attorney could argue was that there has still yet to be a murder weapon found. However, prosecutors were ready, and they actually had more evidence than what they had against James before. FBI was able to get the phone records of James, and it put him in the vicinity of where the bodies were murdered. And they also had James' girlfriend testify that she came and picked him up from the Whataburger, which was across the street from the strip club where the vehicle was left. That was all jury members needed to hear. So on August 10, 2016, after 3 hours of deliberation, The jury did convict James Cosby guilty of capital murder. Due to all the circumstantial evidence and it not being enough to get that boy evicted from life, he was charged with life in prison without the possibility of parole. He did try to later appeal his case, but obviously, obviously, that got thrown out. Now, he never really confessed to the crime nor gave a reason as to why he did it. Now, police have speculated and kind of painted a picture as far as what the evidence tells them that happened the morning of Brittany and Crystal's murder. Everyone knew that there was a lot of tension between Brittany and her dad. He just did not believe or agree with her sexuality, and he didn't like that she was a lesbian. And there was a lot of resentment and jealousy on his part. He felt as if Brittany had a better life than him and she had things that he wanted, such as them having a car. He was envious that the two of them had bought them a car. They were no longer on public transportation, but he still had to swipe his little old badge or pass in order to get from point A to point B. He was also upset the fact that while Brittany and Crystal had a room in their great grandmother's home, he essentially didn't. He had to sleep in the garage living area, and he just felt so upset about that. He just felt like they were doing so much better in life and that they had things that he wanted. And it's like, dude, this is your daughter. Wouldn't you want her to have a better life than you? I also read that he had found out that Miss Annie was leaving all of her assets to Brittany and not to him, and that didn't rub him the right way. But I think the most effed up thing about this was, it was said that he was mad about how they spent their money and how they ate. The girls would order themselves and the baby, and even Miss Annie, they would order pizza for themselves. And while they were eating on pizza, he was sitting over there with an attitude, eating on the doggone bologna sandwich. And apparently none of that said well with him. He was just a bitter bitch, basically. It's speculated that on the morning that the murder occurred, James and Brittany got into some type of heated conversation and things quickly turned violent. After things got out of hand, he hit her over the head with a blunt force object so hard that it instantly broke her neck, and then he continued to beat her and strangle her till she was basically unrecognizable. Her skull was fractured and broken so bad that her brain was actually leaking out of holes in her skull. Now, at this time, it was said that Crystal, I guess, was out in the car waiting for Brittany, and she was kind of trying to figure out what was going on. And in the midst of James attacking Brittany, Crystal walks in, and then at that point, obviously, he started attacking her. So he did in fact strangle Crystal as well, but ended up just shooting her. I would say the saddest thing to me in this whole case was learning that throughout this whole time when James was murdering his daughter and his basically daughter-in-law, baby Zanaya was in the car the whole time while her mothers were getting murdered in the inside. So she sat in the car for who knows how long. I guess James at that point started to clean up the mess. And then Zanaya, she came in the house looking for people and everyone was gone. And that's just really so sad that that poor baby was there that whole time. However, James, he's exactly where he belongs. He's currently serving out his sentence in Alfred D. Hughes unit in Galveston, Texas, where he will be for the rest of his miserable life. And if you didn't like eating bolognas on the outside, I don't know what you're gonna do on the inside, because word on the street is that's all they eat up in there, a bologna sandwich. So enjoy. But for us, we're about to get ready to go ahead and eat. And how did you guys like today's case? What were your thoughts? How do you feel about James and the situation? with his daughter and just how everything basically went down. Definitely let me know in the comments. And again, if you haven't already done so, please make sure you like, subscribe, and share my videos, and go back and watch my previous videos. But I want to say thank you so very much for joining me for another episode of Murder Meals, and I hope you guys have a good night. Bye.